This video is made for educational purposes. Asian Americans have helped build this country, but it has not been easy for this group to assimilate into American culture, thanks to things like the Chinese Exclusion Act. With the rise of Asian hate following the COVID pandemic, this hasn't stopped the Asian community from thriving. But it's important to remember that Asians are not a monolith, and although the continent of Asia is huge, spanning from Israel to Japan, this list will look specifically at Asian Americans as defined by the US Census. The census defines Asian Americans as those with origins in the Far East, Southeast Asia, or the Indian subcontinent, and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. So if you are from Lebanon or Kazakhstan, sorry, but despite being Asian, you are not included on this list. But don't blame us, blame the US Census. As always, stay tuned until the end when we list the states with the least amount of Asian Americans. Number 10 is Maryland with 7.5%. Diversity is no stranger to Maryland, which shouldn't be a shock given its proximity to the nation's capital. Maryland's Asian population has increased dramatically since 2000, and both Baltimore and Rockville are home to small Chinatowns. The majority of Asians in Maryland are of Indian descent, followed by Chinese, Korean, Filipino, and Vietnamese. In addition to Chinatown, Koreatown, based in Ellicott City, is home to over 170 Korean businesses, including food shops, barbecue restaurants, and bakeries. Asian businesses have contributed to Maryland's economy in a variety of sectors, ranging from food to medicine to technology. According to the Asian American Chamber of Commerce of Maryland, Asian American businesses bring in more than half of the revenues generated by all minority businesses throughout the state. Earlier this year, Indian American Aruna Miller became Maryland's 10th lieutenant governor, becoming the first Asian American to hold a statewide position. Number 9 is Massachusetts with 7.7%. The dominant ethnic group is Chinese and live mostly in Boston and its suburbs. From 2000 to 2010, a Boston suburb, Quincy, had its Chinese population increase by almost 60%. As of 2000, 65% of the Chinese in Quincy were homeowners. Acton, a suburb just north of Boston, had a 151% increase in Chinese immigrants from 2000 to 2010. Downtown Boston's Chinatown is the cultural heart of the city for authentic Chinese food, crafts, clothing, and more. Unlike some states on this list, the Chinese immigrants in Boston come from all parts of the country, which means the Chinese cuisine is more varied than your typical wonton soup found at many Chinese restaurants that cater to Americans. This increase in Chinese immigrants can be seen in the economics of aviation. Hainan Airlines began non-stop service between Beijing and Boston in 2014, followed by non-stop service between Shanghai and Boston a year later. Cathay Pacific Airways also began non-stop service between Hong Kong and Boston in 2015. These non-stop flight services between China and Boston were not only to cater to the immigrants, but demonstrate the fact that Chinese are the top nationality visiting Boston from outside North America, with nearly 1 in 4 Chinese visitors coming to Boston for education. Virginia is for lovers, but it's also for Asian Americans, making it number 8 with 7.9% of its population being Asian. Like Maryland, this is largely tied to its proximity to DC. Virginia has a wealth of diversity within its Asian community, with the largest number being from India, followed by South Korea, China, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Nearly 70% of Virginia's Asian population is foreign-born, with many coming for education, business, and to reunite with family. As a whole, Asians have a higher than average median home income for Virginia and are more likely to go to college than their Virginia peers. Virginia has many museums dedicated to Asian art and culture, although those in the Metro DC area tend to flock to the capital for a wider variety of authentic food and culture. Not counting English, then after Spanish, Chinese and Vietnamese are the 2 most commonly spoken languages in Virginia. The Asian population is disproportionately nestled in the Metro DC area, which is to be expected. Much of Western Virginia is rural and has far more of a southern culture than a metropolis one. Number 7 is Alaska with 8.8%. This state should also come as no surprise, given not only its proximity to Asia, but also because its native population can trace its roots to Asia. This is where the US Census gets muddy. Alaska, if its Native Alaskan and Indian population were counted, should be number 3 on this list, but like I said, the US Census is complicated. But that's a whole other topic of conversation. Aside from the Alaskan natives, the oldest ethnic group from Asia have been the Filipinos, who have been coming to Alaska since the 1700s. Known then as Manila Men, they served as crew members of fur trading vessels. In the early 1900s, they largely worked in the gold mines in Juneau. Filipinos still make up the largest Asian subset group in Alaska, followed by Korean, Chinese, and Japanese. Anchorage Airport has been a vital refueling hub for cargo flights, dating back to the Soviet era when Soviet airspace was off limits, forcing planes to take longer routes from North America to Asia. All flights coming to and from Asia had to make a pit stop in Anchorage to refuel. The airport has long since been known as the hidden link between North America and Asia. Number 6 is New York with 9.6%. This should come as no surprise, as New York City is one of the most diverse metropolises in the entire world. Manhattan hosts the world's largest Chinatown, the Empire State Building actually sits in Koreatown, and Laotian food isn't hard to find. Hungry for something from Tibet? Come to New York. Ever wonder what authentic Cambodian food was like? Come to New York. New York City even boasts North Korean cuisine, which is different from what we would see in typical Korean restaurants with offerings from South Korea. There are more than enough museums that feature Asian art and culture, as well as language schools and churches with offerings in just about any Asian language you desire. And it's not just New York City. Upstate New York is rapidly becoming more diverse, with Erie, Albany, and Onondaga counties having a large population of Asian Americans and other recent immigrants. Many Asians who want to leave the city for the suburbs are also moving out to Long Island in record numbers. New York has always been a hub for immigration, and those coming from Asia are no exception. Number 5 is Nevada with 10%. This one may come as a surprise, as Nevada is largely desert and sparsely populated in most regions beyond Las Vegas. The largest Asian ethnic group in Clark County, home of Las Vegas, is Filipino, followed by Chinese, and then Hawaiian/Pacific Islanders. Nevada is one of only 5 states where Asians have reached 10% of the population. In both the US and Nevada, Asians are the fastest growing demographic group. Between 2000 and 2020, the Asian population doubled nationwide. Despite their achievements and high educational attainment, this stereotype of Asians being the model minority has masked the disparities within the Asian community, once again reminding us that Asia is a continent, not a monolithic ethnic group. Asian and Pacific Islanders in Nevada have far exceeded their peers when it comes to education, with a 95% graduation rate. They also accounted for 14% of the gifted and talented programs. However, as the pandemic showed us, Asian Americans are not immune to hate and racism despite their achievements. The Asian American and Pacific Islander community in Nevada have been fighting hard since the pandemic to bring awareness to the disparities and need for resources within their community. Despite their higher than average incomes, they also disproportionately represent those without healthcare and those who are unhoused in Nevada. So there is work to be done. Number 4 is New Jersey with 10.2%. This is no surprise given its proximity to New York City, as northern New Jersey is part of a greater metro area boasting a wealth of diversity. Like in the rest of the US, Asians are the fastest growing demographic in the state of New Jersey. Some of this can be due to many Asians from New York City choosing to move out to the suburbs while still being able to commute to their jobs in the city. In 2022, New Jersey became the second state after Illinois to make Asian American and Pacific Island history mandatory in K-12 curricula. This move was due to wanting its schools to better reflect the demographics of the state, and with a population over 10%, it seems only logical that this would be part of American history. Another law will establish a commission for Asian American heritage within the state's Department of Education, with the expressed purpose of partnering with local schools as they implement this new curriculum. It's important that the history and culture be taught accurately and with proper sensitivity to those communities. Way to go, New Jersey. Number 3 is Washington with 10.9%. Much of the Pacific Northwest has a rich history of Asian immigration from Alaska down to Vancouver to Seattle all the way to San Diego. The largest Asian ethnic group in Washington state is Chinese, followed by Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Indian, and then Filipino. The Chinese were the first Asian ethnic group to migrate to Washington state back in the mid-19th century. By the 1860s and 1870s, when gold was struck in the state, many Chinese immigrants came en masse to work in the mines. Sadly, many of these immigrants were also recruited to work on the railroads where conditions were dangerous and pay was low. The Smithsonian had an exhibit in Washington state, the first of its kind, to honor the forgotten Chinese workers who helped build the Transcontinental Railroad, which opened up the American frontier to the East Coast. This vital piece of infrastructure set in motion the building of a superpower nation spanning from the Atlantic to the Pacific. 2019 marked the 150-year anniversary of the completion of the railroad, so Washington has made sure to honor those for whose backs the railroad was built upon. Though the Chinese got economic opportunity, they also faced hatred, racism, and legal exclusion. The rich history of Asian workers puts Washington state at number 3 on this list. Number 2 is California with 17.3%. Though the largest Chinatown is located in New York City, the most famous is undoubtedly in San Francisco. It is also the oldest one, established in 1848. It's hard not to see the influence of Asian culture up and down the California coast when you see landmarks such as Little Tokyo and the Asian Art Museum. This is also prevalent in its food and language. California's Asian population has grown 25% over the last decade, and that has enriched both the cultural and economic landscape of the state. The dominant groups are Filipino, Chinese, Vietnamese, Indian, Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese, and Cambodian. This diverse mix of ethnic groups has been a rich part of California's history since the mid-1800s when the first Asian immigrants arrived in the Golden State. These newly established communities faced a lot of adversity throughout the decades, from the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, all the way to the ineligibility for citizenship imposed on Asian immigrants until the 1960s. But that hasn't stopped them from thriving in education and business. Before we get to number 1, can you guess the state with the fewest Asian Americans? It's also the state with the fewest people, period. That honor goes to Wyoming. There are only 4,633 Asian Americans living in Wyoming, making up less than 1% of the population. Now let's take a look at the state with the most Asian Americans in the nation. To be fair, if we include US territories, then Guam and American Samoa win by a landslide, which makes sense given that they are in the South Pacific. Speaking of the South Pacific, number 1 is Hawaii with 56%. This should come as no surprise given its proximity to Asia, and not to mention that Hawaiian is in the description from the US Census. Hawaii is a majority-minority state, meaning that white people, while being a national majority, are a minority in Hawaii, with Asian Americans dominating paradise. Asian and native culture are evident throughout the islands, from its food to even surfing. The first senator of Chinese descent represented Hawaii in 1959. Followed by Daniel Inouye in 1963, who was of Japanese descent. The most famous Hawaiian representative of modern times is Tulsi Gabbard, who made history running for president in 2020. Some of the best food that is native to Hawaii is poke, poi, and lomi lomi. Japanese influence can be seen in many of Hawaii's cuisine as well. It is not uncommon in Hawaii-grade schools to take Japanese, Mandarin, or Korean as a foreign language. Students can also learn Hawaiian language and culture in K-12 schools. Did you know that there is a dark side to Hawaii? Click this next video to learn about some of the struggles Hawaii faces.